Now that we've had Season 6 of Battlefield 2042 for a while, I felt like it was a good time to go over some of the major points that have been standing out to me, and also talk a bit about Redacted, the new infantry-focused map that has taken heavy inspiration from Operation Locker and Operation Metro of previous Battlefield games. So to start out with some of the general things about the update, the new assault rifle, called the VHX D3, is very strong. Personally, I find it to be a bit of a boring addition to the game. It's yet another low recoil, highly accurate assault rifle with a high rate of fire that is extremely versatile. So it's basically just the AM40 again, or the GEW46, or the M5. Of course, there are small differences between these weapons, but we're getting to a point in the assault rifle and SMG categories where releasing new guns feels like they're all too functionally identical to be interesting to use in game. In terms of its balance though, it's arguably the best AR in the game right now, but I wouldn't call it overpowered. The new DMR, called the G428, is definitely one of the most overpowered weapons we've had in 2042 thus far, rivaling the BSVM when that was first released. You can put it in full auto mode, and while the fire rate is quite slow, it still kills in 2 shots, which is made even more oppressive by the fact that recoil in 2042 is so easy to control. Again, I just don't have much interest in this gun. Really, I wish we would have gotten some unique, interesting weapons to add to the tactical category to really mix up how you play the game. Or if we are going to add ARs, DMRs, and SMGs, I'd just like to see them have some kind of real identity that sets them apart from other weapons in their categories. Though with things like static headshot multipliers per category, this is a lot more difficult to do. Even the new pistol feels like a waste. If a new sidearm can't meaningfully compete with the Glock or the Desert Eagle, or at least offer some kind of unique experience, it just feels like fodder to pad out the category rather than something worth using. I'm not saying every new weapon release needs to be this crazy thing that reinvents the wheel, but I'd just like to see things with more identity than what we got here, and when coupled with the fact that we only got 3 new weapons, it just feels really disappointing. I might feel a little better about it if we got something like 5 or 6. The new vehicle, the YUV-2 Pondhawk, is actually a really cool addition to the game. I'm a little surprised that it's not just a civilian vehicle, but it's a lot of fun and kind of plays into that meme crazy style of play that you can find in Battlefield. Overall, a solid yet somewhat silly addition, but opens up a lot of cool playmaking potential. One of the biggest gameplay changes that has been a huge improvement though was the fix for recoil. If you're unaware of what I'm talking about, especially new players, I'll link a video below that explains what I'm talking about in more detail, but basically before Season 6, there was a tendency for the center of the screen and the red dot on optics to become decoupled from one another, like extremely so, and it made gunplay, especially at longer range, feel really strange, and the gun models could very often obfuscate a lot of the screen. That's been fixed though in Season 6, with the deviation that exists now being very slight and only there to simulate a bit of visual recoil. And I have to say that it's done a lot to make the guns perform way more reliably and consistently than before. Burst firing especially feels useful now. In the past, after the bullet spread changes, I would always use single fire mode at longer ranges, but now I'm having a lot more success with microbursting and only need to use that single fire mode for really extreme ranges. I also find that the weapon model isn't obscuring targets as often since it stays where it's supposed to be, meaning that prolonged fire doesn't feel nearly as jarring and frustrating. I think it's also done a lot to improve the perception of mouse input. Mouse input still isn't in a great place in 2042, but I think this reticle problem was a noticeable contributor to the feeling of poor mouse input. But with this great change, there also comes a terrible one. DICE changed suppressors so that the only real way to stay off the map while firing is to combine them with subsonic ammo. To me, this change is absolutely insane and completely invalidates the entire stealth and flank playstyle. If you're the type of player that like to get flanks on the enemy team and cause confusion as you fired without immediately revealing your position, well, kiss your effectiveness goodbye because it's pretty much dead now. Subsonic ammo is not a very good ammo type in this game, especially when options like close quarters ammo significantly improve in fire rate and thus performance and TTK of a weapon. So trying to play into DICE's design decision here means you'll lose pretty much any gunfight you take head on if your opponent is even remotely close to your skill level. This change just really baffles me since stealth already felt like a strategy that's fairly weak in this game compared to not just other FPS games, but previous Battlefield games as well. There are just so many ways for enemies to spot you in this game. You stay on the minimap for so long that it honestly feels really bizarre to continually nerf suppressors and stealth playstyles. Hopefully they revert this change at some point in the future, but in the meantime, I'd highly recommend getting rid of suppressors on your guns. And from here, I wanted to talk about Redacted, the highly anticipated, fully indoor, infantry-only map, the meat grinder of 2042. As always, my thoughts are coming from a PC player that plays pretty much exclusively Conquest. Officially, Redacted is a 64-player map, and for Conquest, I've really been enjoying it. In my opinion, as someone who's never really liked Operation Locker or Operation Metro or that meat grinder style in general, I actually think Redacted might be the best meat grinder map in any Battlefield. While there are choke points, matches aren't just prolonged stalemates the whole time and from 1 or 2 corridors dominated by prone LMG users firing down that same hallway constantly. There's not just 1 or 2 small routes being barraged by grenades repeatedly, making it a miracle if you get to the other side and manage to take on 1 or 2 enemies before getting killed yourself. Redacted offers a lot of alternate routes to break these stalemates and prevent them from taking up the entirety of a match. It's much easier here to get around the cluster of enemies to get a flank and break their line, or to try and capture an unguarded objective behind them and force them to respond. And thankfully the explosive changes in Season 6 have made navigating all of these areas much less dangerous. The dome areas offer a more open respite from firing down hallways, with a little more room to breathe and maneuver in these engagements, though it can get very chaotic with enemies from all angles. The biggest criticism I have from a gameplay perspective is that if one team is able to push another team all the way back to the flag near their spawn, it can become trivial to spawn trap them for large portions of the game. I've had several matches in the mid game become a prolonged spawn trap that creates such a lead that even when the trap team is able to break out, the score is so lopsided that there's no hope for a comeback. Generally, this shouldn't happen if the teams are relatively similar in skill level, but I've noticed that just 1 or 2 skilled, coordinated squads can do a lot to create a spawn trap and keep the enemy there. It doesn't happen every game, but when it does, the match can become a bit boring. This might be exacerbated by the influx of new players that aren't quite as skilled at the game yet, so hopefully that fixes itself over time. Aside from that, Redacted is visually the most stunning map in 2042, and it's full of personality and identity. The emphasis on lore is clear, and it's something I wish they would bring to other maps in the game. To me, only Spearhead, Stranded, and Reclaimed come even close to having this much character, and even then, they don't hold a candle to Redacted. This is the immersion that's been missing in 2042. So overall, I enjoy the map a lot more than I expected to, and it's a great addition to this game. So from here, I wanted to briefly finish this off with a discussion about the future of 2042. I know this happens every season. Every time a season releases, there's a general consensus from a lot of players and creators, without any real meaningful evidence, that this will be the last season for 2042. Obviously, I could be wrong, but to me, there's a ton of evidence to the contrary. As far as hard evidence, there was a Prime Gaming page that revealed there would be Prime content drops for 11 more months, implying that 2042 support may last until late 2024. This aligns with what I've been saying the whole time about this game. The next Battlefield title likely won't release until early 2025, maybe holiday season of 2024 at the earliest, and 2042 is the only Battlefield game at the moment that has an active live service and can be continually monetized until the next game releases. In my opinion, from a business perspective, it would make no sense at this juncture to cut off 2042 at Season 6. There's also this recent free-to-play weekend, which included a Steam sale price on 2042 for about $10 US. To me, this indicates another renewed effort from DICE and EA to bring in new players, which would obviously do a lot to boost microtransaction sales on top of the base price of the game. Why try to pull in new players if you're stopping development on a game? Plus, we saw the numbers on Steam break the all-time high for 2042 multiple times in the past week, and with a shockingly high conversion rate from those free players to paid players, there's just a much larger incentive to keep releasing content like battle passes and microtransactions. On top of that, I see a lot of creators and players saying that since DICE is making a lot of quality of life changes and overhauls to the game with this season, that they're trying to essentially finish work on the game so they can move on from it. To me, I really don't understand the logic here. As a software engineer myself, this pattern does not at all match the way that we support products. Increased effort and attention to a product means we're trying to actively push and support the product, not put it in a position where we can abandon it with less blowback. There's never less blowback to abandoning something, and if we are going to abandon something, we are usually going to offer some sort of discount or alternate product in its place, not just try to finish the existing product. I'm not a game developer, and every sphere of development can differ greatly, but to me, I'm seeing a lot of increased developer focus on 2042 over the last couple of seasons, and from my experience in my career, that's more indicative of a company that's trying to revitalize interest in the product where they see potential for more profit than it's getting. On top of that, DICE is well aware of their reputation for abruptly ending support for Battlefield 5 and Battlefront 2. Then the poor launch of 2042 led to even more diminished trust from the player base. EA and DICE know that if they want the new Battlefield games to succeed, they need to rebuild that trust, and that starts with continued support and improvement of 2042. They cannot abandon another game. They need to see this one through and show everyone that they're serious and can power through the adversity and put out a good product at the end. So far, I think they've been doing an excellent job at recovering. Besides all of that though, I've seen repeatedly every season people saying that since DICE isn't announcing a roadmap or something for content after the season that's currently releasing, that it means there must be no content or seasons planned in the future. I'm also not too sure of this logic. That's never been DICE's MO with 2042, and if DICE has proven anything, it's that they'll do things their own way. I suspect they want to give Season 6 plenty of room to breathe and get its own attention, especially with what seems like a more unique Halloween-themed event upcoming. And after that, we'll probably start to see Easter eggs and teasers for Season 7. And with all of that in mind, I feel fairly confident we'll get at least Seasons 7 and 8, potentially even as far as a Season 10 before support starts to wind down. From a business perspective, that's just what makes the most sense. And at the end of the day, EA and DICE are businesses and will generally go with the route that makes the most business sense. Those are my thoughts on Season 6, Redacted, in the future of 2042, and I want to hear from you. How do you think Redacted compares to Metro and Locker? If you're a new player to 2042 after the free weekend, what convinced you to keep playing? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to talk about it. And with that, thank you all for watching. Leave a like or a dislike, and I'll see you in the next video.